Well, we're 2 weeks into the NFL season, and we are starting to see some trends. Some running backs are dominating touches, others are stuck in committees, and a few sleepers are starting to pop. So here's how the top 30 running back rankings shake out heading into week 3. What's up, Headliner Nation? My name is Brad, the Rankings King, and before we dive into this week's rankings, just a reminder that these are the consensus rankings between Jake and Kyle. And for more detailed analysis, check out the start-sit videos from Kyle already posted this week. If you want even more breakdowns each week, be sure to join the Fantasy Headliners community by hitting the join button below. That's going to get you access to extra rankings like flex, kicker, and defense, and a spot in our Discord community. All right, before we dive in, we've got some hits and misses from last week. First up on our hits, we've got Alvin Kamara, and we continue to rank him as a mid RB2 with the targets returning in week 2. We believe it's only going to help him return the value of his ranking. Next up, we've got Travis Etienne, and we mentioned last week that Etienne could find success in the receiving game against a Cincy defense that is vulnerable against pass-catching backs. And so Etienne ended up scoring a receiving touchdown. And then what about DeAndre Swift? Everyone continues to hate on Swift, but we keep him in the top 24, and guess what? He keeps finishing in the top 24. So that's our hits. Let's move into our misses. The first miss was James Conner, and he was in line for a great day against Carolina, but Trey Benson stole a lot of the pass-catching work, and so we had Conner a little bit high. I know a lot of people were frustrated. Ramondre Stevenson. Hey, everyone heard this week that New England was going to change up the backfield touches, and we all expected that to benefit Henderson, but it benefited Ramondre, and well, here we are. Sorry about that. All right, and then we've got Javonte Williams. And okay, listen, he's done it in back-to-back games now, and he looks better than he has in years. This guy, he's for real, and he's going to be climbing the rankings moving forward. All right, so that's our hits and misses. Let's move it into tier number 1. We've got Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, James Cook, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, and Bucky Irving. First up, we've got Bijan Robinson going into Carolina, and he's the current RB4 on the season and now gets a matchup against Carolina, who allows almost 20 fantasy points per game to running backs. Bijan's already showed us a 100-yard rush game and a 100-yard receiving game, and it just shows how high the ceiling really could be for week number 3. Next up, we've got Christian McCaffrey, and he's got back-to-back 100-yard games, and with Mac Jones now at quarterback, you have to expect that he'll still be highly involved. CMC, he's got 50 touches over the first 2 weeks, and now he gets Arizona, who he has crushed in the past. At number 3, we've got Saquon Barkley, and no other team in the NFL has allowed fewer points to running backs than the Rams. Now, through the first 2 weeks, Saquon's yardage is down, but he continues to find the end zone. And in a Philly offense that runs as much as it does, it only helps even in these tough matchups. At number 4 is Derrick Henry. And listen, week 2, it was a killer to fantasy lineups. He struggled early, and then Baltimore got such a big lead that he didn't really get a chance to right the ship. Now, he gets a tough matchup against Detroit, but the Lions have also allowed rushing TDs in back-to-back weeks, hoping for a bounce-back week for Derrick Henry. At number 5, we've got James Cook. And guess what? Fun fact, he is the RB1 overall on the season, and he now gets a matchup against Miami, who is allowing over 24 fantasy points per game to running backs. Miami has already allowed 278 rushing yards over the first 2 weeks of the season, and there is no reason to not have him ranked highly, and that's why we've got him at number 5. And then Jahmyr Gibbs at number 6. Somewhat of a slower start to start the season for Gibbs, but just like last year, he's almost a lock for 10 fantasy points per game. Now he's got a matchup against Baltimore, and that's not the greatest, but his pass-catching upside should help him keep his floor safe this week. And then we've got Jonathan Taylor going into Tennessee, and he's picking up right where he left off in 2024. Now he's got 95 yards in 7 straight games games going back to 2024. And on the season, Tennessee has allowed the 10th most fantasy points per game to running backs. So JT finds himself higher in the ranks this week at number 7. And then rounding out tier 1, we've got Bucky Irving. And we all wish that late game touchdown would have went to Bucky, but don't let that worry you. He scored 12 plus points in back-to-back games and has averaged over 20 touches a game. And the Jets have allowed the 8th most fantasy points per game to running backs. Lock Bucky in at tier number 1. Now, before we head into the next tier, I just had a quick question for you. Do you have an account on Underdog? Because we're going to be dominating those player pick'ems on Underdog this year, and now is the time to sign up. Head over to Underdog Fantasy or download the app. Create a new account using the referral code HEADLINERS when you do. And then just make your initial deposit and come join a contest. You're also going to get a first-time deposit bonus and a free player pick'em. And Jake is also going to be breaking down the picks weekly in a show on Fridays. And guess what? He wants me to tell you that he hit 19 picks in the Discord this week, and he signs my paychecks. And so there you go. It's worth your time. Links to join are in the description, and we look forward to playing with you this week. All right, let's move into tier number 2. We've got De'Von Achane, Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, and Chase Brown. At number 9, De'Von Achane going into Buffalo. And if history plays a part at all, we shouldn't be totally scared off of Achane going against Buffalo. He scored at least 1 touchdown in every game that he's played against the Bills in his career, and it helps that he's gotten 14 targets over the first 2 weeks. Next up, we've got Josh Jacobs going into Cleveland, and similar to Gibbs, he has had a solid start to the season, but hasn't had that big game yet. Well, this week, it's not going to be an easy one. Cleveland allows the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to running backs, and they've already faced Chase Brown and Derrick Henry. Then we've got Alvin Kamara at the number 11 slot, and we have a chance for a big Kamara week here. Seattle has been torched by pass-catching backs this year. First CMC and then Jaylen Warren last week. And Kamara saw his targets increase in week 2, and hopefully they increase in week 3 again. Then coming in at number 12, we've got Javonte Williams going into Chicago. And the Javonte Williams bounce back looks legit. He looks like he did his rookie year, and Dallas is fully committed to him. He's the current RB2 and averaging 20.7 fantasy points per game, and now he gets Chicago, who has allowed the 2nd most fantasy points per game to running backs. Lock Javonte into number 12. Then we've got Travis Etienne going against the Texans, and he's now scored 15 fantasy points in back-to-back games and seems to be the only consistent weapon in the Jags offense. On top of that, Houston's given up TDs to backs in back-to-back games, and Etienne should have that chance again this week. At number 14, we've got Chase Brown going into Minnesota, and Jake Browning is now the quarterback, and Brown is the clear leader in the backfield, but will he get the scoring opportunities? That's the question. Now, Minnesota has been vulnerable on the ground, but it feels like he's going to need a big play to produce. And so that rounds out tier number 2. Now, moving on to tier number 3, we've got Jordan Mason, Kenneth Walker III, Ashton Jeanty, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, Chuba Hubbard, and James Conner. At number 15, we've got Jordan Mason. He's going to get a chance at a huge workload with Jones and JJ out, and Mason has looked decent in 2025, but in a matchup this week against Cincy, who allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game to running backs, he has the chance to have the best game of the season. Next up, we've got Kenneth Walker III and the drama that is the Seattle backfield. A headache. One thing is for sure, Walker did look healthy in week 2, and Charbonnet still got touches, but he couldn't do anything with them. And so expect this to stay near a 50-50 split for now in a decent matchup. And then at number 17, we've got Ashton Jeanty going against the Washington Commanders. And back in June, we actually made a video on potential red flag players. And in that show, Ashton Jeanty was highlighted as one of those players. Now we're seeing why through 2 weeks. Now we get to Washington, who has allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. And then at 18, we've got Breece Hall going into Tampa Bay. And teams can't run the ball when they fall behind by multiple scores early. And that's what happened to Breece last week. Fields is out this week, but they are going to have to keep the game close, or Breece is going to struggle again against Tampa. Next up, we've got Kyren Williams, and it's back-to-back games with 66 yards rushing and 19 touches. Now, Corum stole the touchdown in week 2, but the game was sealed at the time, and they gave the kid a chance at his first touchdown. And this matchup against Philadelphia is tough. Next up, we've got Chuba Hubbard, and the ceiling that this guy could have if Carolina ever had a lead, if they ever had a lead, would be huge. He is in a true bell cow role and now has receiving touchdowns in back-to-back games, but now he gets a matchup against Atlanta, and they have allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. And then at number 21, rounding out tier number 3, we've got James Conner going into San Francisco. And right now, touchdowns are saving Conner. He only has 96 total yards in 2 games, but he has touchdowns in each game. Trey Benson, he's getting a little more work week by week, and that is only making things more difficult for us to really trust Conner. All right. That's tier number 3. Let's move it on to tier number 4. We've got Jaylen Warren, Tony Pollard, J.K. Dobbins, Ramondre Stevenson, DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, Omarion Hampton, Nick Chubb, and Isaiah Pacheco. At number 22, we've got Jaylen Warren, and Warren exploded in week 2. He had 134 total yards, but Arthur Smith, you know we love Arthur Smith on this channel, still insists on having Kenneth Gainwell on the field 40% of the time. New England, they've been easier to throw on than to run, so let's hope for 5+ targets again this week. At number 23, we've got Tony Pollard, and it's 2 tough matchups to start the year against Denver and Rams, but the Titans are always trailing. Doesn't help him at all either. He's had 19+ touches in each game this year, which is great. So is the fact that Indy has allowed over 18 fantasy points per game to running backs. At number 24, we've got J.K. Dobbins going against the Chargers, and a J.K. Dobbins revenge game could be loading against his former team in LA. The Chargers, they've played great against running backs so far in 2025 though, and they've allowed the 2nd fewest fantasy points per game, so they could be for real. Dobbins is going to need a touchdown to have a good day, and that's not going to be easy. At number 25, we've got Ramondre Stevenson, and everyone expected more Henderson, but some early season mistakes have handed the bulk of touches to Ramondre, and he's playing great with the chance that he's gotten, and now they get the Steelers, who have allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to running backs. Next up, we've got DeAndre Swift, and through 2 weeks, he's been pretty inefficient. He continues to dominate the backfield touches, but he had no chance to get going in week 2 after Chicago just got blown out by Detroit. Now, Dallas has allowed right at 20 fantasy points per game to running backs, so that helps a little bit. At number 27, we've got David Montgomery going into Baltimore, and unfortunately, I think that we are at the point where Monty is not a locked-in safe start weekly. Gibbs' role is so large that Monty has to have a touchdown to be start-worthy, and in a matchup against Baltimore, that is not going to be the easiest task. At number 28, we've got Omarion Hampton, and he has been a huge disappointment in 2025. And this is what happens, though, when there's injuries on the offensive line. He has at least been the clear leader in the backfield, and Denver has been easier than expected to run on than throw thus far this year. So let's see if we can get a bounce-back game. And then at number 29, we've got Nick Chubb going into Jacksonville, and we finally saw a glimpse of old-school Chubb in week 2 when he broke a 27-yard touchdown run. Now, Pierce has been a healthy scratch. Marks is just getting scraps, and Jacksonville has been easier to throw on than run, but Chubb still makes the top 30. And then last up at number 30, we've got Isaiah Pacheco. And if there was ever a do or die moment for the value of Pacheco, it's this week. No team in the NFL has allowed more fantasy points per game to running backs than the Giants. And on the other side, Pacheco, he hasn't done anything in forever. It's a lot of risk here, but it's a great matchup. Okay, so there's your tiers 1, 2, 3, and 4. And on the outside looking in, we've got Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Cam Skid-Diddly-Dadbo, Zach Charbonnet, Trey Benson, Bashul Tootin, RJ Harvey, and Rachaad White. And that's the full slate of running backs for week number 3, from the elite workhorses to the flex-worthy wild cards. Let us know, who are you starting? Who are you sitting? Who are you completely panicking about in in the comments. Smash that like button, subscribe for more weekly breakdowns, and lock in with Headliner Nation. Come on, it's time to run it back. Week 3, let's chase that W. We'll see you in the next video.
Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.